There we go. So hello and welcome. Has everyone got their drink? Got a glass of water, a cup of tea, and we can get going. So I'm Jennifer Harrington. I'm going to be with you today. And what most people know about me is that I'm a naturopath with over 21 years of clinical experience. But what you probably don't know about me is that early perimenopause really kicked my butt, and that most of my problems were linked to mineral deficiencies, and hence why I'm so passionate about this topic. So in my case, the main deficiency was iron due to my heavy menstrual bleeds caused by my uterine fibroid and my polyps. Yay! But it wasn't just iron. And as we move through tonight, you'll discover that mineral deficiencies don't happen in isolation. So you found out a little bit about me. Now, I would like to know a little bit about you. Let me just pop the poll up. Okay, so if you guys can quickly fill that in for me, what I wanted to let you know is that there are so many essential minerals for human health, and we don't have time to discuss them all today. So I wanted to see what sort of symptoms you were experiencing and whereabouts you were in the transition so I can change the discussion as we go along, and I know where to focus and where I can skip through so that it's more relevant for you guys that have turned up today. And I also wanted to let you know, in my book, From Invisible to Invincible, it has a really handy minerals reference guide that includes food sources, deficiencies, uses, cautions, medical interactions, and contraindications. So many women tell me that they find the reference guide really handy, but I didn't add it in the book so that you can self-prescribe. I did it more so that it's a conversation starter to have with your healthcare team. Now let's see how we've gone with this poll. Let me end it. So we have 60% in perimenopause and 40% in postmenopause. So I'll make sure I cover, especially when we go to iron, it's slightly different depending on where you are in the transition. We can find that 60% of you have fatigue, about 15% have sleep issues, about 45% have weight issues, about 40% with heat, 15% or so with mood changes, got a bit of dryness, a little bit of cardiovascular concerns, and that 100% of you are mild, which is really wonderful. If you were in the talk last night, we was discussing 20% of women breeze through without a concern. They simply just stop menstruating, and 20% of the people have really extreme, intense, horrible symptoms. The rest of us are in the middle somewhere, and that's what we are today. So this was just a how common is my symptoms. So this was taken from the Evernow study, which is the largest study on women in the menopausal transition. It was looking at 100,000 women, and this was just looking at how common some of the symptoms are. What I find is really interesting is most women go, oh, menopause, hot flushes. But actually, that's not the number one symptom of the transition. The number one symptom is fatigue, followed by sleep disturbances, weight gain, and brain fog. These are the most common, but common doesn't equal normal. Just wanted to make sure you're aware of that definition. So let's move on. Today, what we are going to be discussing is 6 crucial nutrients. Where do I want to start with that? Sorry, guys, I've lost my slide. Okay, all right. So let's start with this. So we're going to look at 6 crucial nutrients. We're going to look at what are minerals, what causes mineral deficiencies, how do we replete our mineral deficiencies, and we're going to look at some of the core minerals for menopause and then we'll go through any questions that you may have. So I really want to get started by looking at the 6 crucial nutrients because I think of the body as a house. So you really need a solid foundation in order to have true health. And without optimizing all of these nutrients, you can't have a solid foundation. So we're looking at, do you have adequate water? Are you consuming adequate carbohydrates, adequate protein, and fats? And fats was a big discussion on Tuesday when we were talking about, well, we now understand that low-fat diet is dangerous, but there's some confusion about what is a good fat and a bad fat. So if you're not quite sure, then you might want to go back and watch Tuesday's replay. We need to make sure that you've got adequate vitamins and minerals. Now, all of these building blocks are non-negotiable. We need them all if we want good health, and they are all really important. But we're focusing on minerals today. So, what are minerals? Minerals, as I mentioned, are key health building blocks. They are essential for life. They are found in our soil and in our water. They are taken up by the plants or the animals that consume these plants. And minerals must be obtained through the diet as we can't produce them. They are inorganic and hold on to their chemical form when exposed to air, heat, and water. And this is really what differentiates them from vitamins, as vitamins are organic and they break down when they're exposed to these elements. But I'll leave that there for today with vitamins. Okay, so with mineral deficiencies, I particularly liked this book, The Mineral Fix by Dr. James. Now, Dr. James is a cardiovascular medical researcher, and what he has found in his research is that 1 in 3 people have 10 mineral deficiencies. So it's not singular deficiencies, it's all of them across the board. So that's what we're going to be looking at. Well, what's causing so many deficiencies and why is that a factor now where it wasn't potentially a factor in the past? So before we move on, in the chat box, I want to hear from you guys to find out what minerals have you heard of, which ones are you aware of, to give me an understanding of what you already know. Everyone's too shy today, hey? All right, well, I would tell you. So minerals, as you can see, there's many of them. So we don't have time to discuss them all today, but they are all equally as important. So maybe there's some in there that you haven't heard of before, and maybe there's others that are more common that many women have maybe supplemented with or looked for food sources. All right, so let's have a look at mineral deficiencies. So causes. So modern agricultural methods deplete nutrients, downgrade the soil quality, disrupt the water cycle. Plants get their nutrients from the soil and animals get their nutrients from the plants. But if the soil is of poor quality in the first place, then they all miss out. Overall, there is roughly a 30% reduction of minerals in our commercially grown food now compared to the 1940s. And this is a big problem, but it looks promising to see more regenerative agriculture coming into play, but it'll still be a while before this is mainstream. So the next point is environmental toxins, such as heavy metals, as they compete for mineral absorption. Take, for example, seafood. If you're eating a lot of seafood, there's a chance you may have elevated mercury. And mercury likes to compete with selenium and zinc for absorption. Another example is lead. And we are the lead generation. We grew up with lead in our petrol, lead in our paint. And I don't know about you, but I certainly chewed on my fair share of lead painted wooden blocks when I was a toddler. And lead likes to knock calcium out of our bones. So we'll chat more about that one later on. So even though you might have been exposed a long time ago, toxic metals like to store in the body. So now is a good time to assess your toxin load and consider if a detoxification program is warranted. The next point is the long-term restricted diets. So things like FODMAPs. Now, this is a great diet designed to be used for a short period of time to give your digestive system relief and to give it time to heal. But many women stay on these diets for too long and end up missing out on many nutrients. And then we have the overconsumption of over-processed foods, which lack in nutrition in the first place. And then you've got the lost art of food preparation. So things like sprouting and soaking and fermenting, because this reduces the amount of anti-nutrient food substances found in plant-based foods. Take phytic acid as an example. It's found in whole grains, legumes, nuts, and seeds. When consumed, it binds to minerals like calcium, magnesium, zinc, and iron to create phytates. Now, humans don't have the enzymes to break phytates down, so these minerals are lost to us. And there are a few other examples of anti-nutrient components like goitrogens, which are found in cruciferous vegetables and soy, and they prevent the absorption of iodine. Lectins that are found in legumes interfere with calcium, iron, and zinc. Oxalates interfere with calcium. And then later on, when we talk about iron, we'll look at the role of tannins found in tea and coffee and how they decrease iron absorption, which we can use for good or for bad, depending on which way you're looking at it. So I really think it's worth thinking about how your grandmother used to prepare food. Did she get her legumes out and soak them in preparation for tomorrow night's dinner? We don't have time to get into all of that today, but I just wanted to start you thinking about that lost art of food preparation. Do you soak any of your foods? Do you sprout any of your foods? Are you fermenting any of them? Because if you're not, it might be time to talk to some of the older people in your family about how they used to prepare food, or maybe even have a look for classes where you can learn how to do some of this. And then finally, we've got the health of the digestive system itself. So inflammatory digestive disorders reduce the body's ability to absorb the nutrients from our foods. And so do digestive infections like H. pylori and medications like antacids. So you could see there's many reasons why we are also nutritional deficient at this stage of life. So let's look at how we can turn that around, how we can change that. So mineral repletion. We want to start by eating a wide variety of foods with a rainbow of different colors on your plate, with daily, weekly, seasonal variation. It's too easy to eat the same foods all the time. We need to go out of our way to try new things and switch up what's on our plate. We need to see whether we can find foods grown at regenerative farms or organic farms. So these farms reject the use of pesticides and synthetic fertilizers. And organic foods are sometimes out of some people's budgets. And if this is the case, I want you to consider the Dirty Dozen. So the Dirty Dozen has the highest amount, the highest concentration of pesticides. And by removing just these foods, you remove 80% of the pesticides from your diet. Now, this list is updated every year by the Environmental Working Group. And I had to look it up because it's changed. And the change from last year to this year is grapes. So this year, the Dirty Dozen includes strawberries in at number 1. We then have spinach, kale, grapes, peaches, pears, nectarines, apples, capsicum, cherries, blueberries, and green beans. So this is where I want you to consider, can you grow some of your own pesticide-free food at home? Like even if you only have a small apartment balcony, you can grow some strawberries. Or you might even have a neighbor that grows something else and that you trade your excess. It's just an easy way that if you're on a budget, just avoiding these 12 foods in their commercial form and looking for them in organic or regenerative. I'm struggling to talk today. So that was that one. We then had a little chat before about learning the lost art of food preparation. So, what we need to do to help to identify and remove anti-food nutrients. So that's soaking, sprouting, fermenting. It's the way foods were traditionally prepared. Now, when it comes to identifying and removing toxins, you may like to work with a practitioner for this to help you try to identify them. So for me, I use hair tissue mineral analysis if I'm worried about metals. I would use a GPL tox test if I'm looking at chemicals. But unfortunately, the world we live in is not a clean one, and we would all be exposed to various forms of different metals and chemicals. The next one is looking at the digestive system. So, optimizing your digestive function so you can tolerate that wide variety of foods and not need those restrictive diets. We need to have adequate acid and enzymes to break down the food so that we can absorb the nutrition from them. So, actually, if you attended Tuesday's webinar on functional foods, we also learnt the role of the microbiome or a good bacteria in helping us convert food particles into active medicinal constituents. Now, that replays on my YouTube channel if you've missed it and you would like to go back and watch it. So, question for you: balneotherapy is probably my most preferred fun way of repleting minerals. Does anyone know what it is? Has anyone heard of this before? No? Then I better tell you so that you can all join in on the benefits of balneotherapy. So it's basically bathing in water or mud with high mineral content. And you can try it at home with an Epsom salt bath, a good way to get in some extra magnesium. Or if you're at a day spa, you can have a mud wrap. Or maybe you want to go on holidays in the Dead Sea and go floating. Because our skin is a really, really effective way of absorbing nutrients in. And especially if you have digestive issues, it bypasses the digestive system and just comes straight in the skin. So when my fibroid was playing up and I was really anemic, I was actually using transdermal iron cream. And that also bypassed any constipation issues. So the dose that I was using was 100 to 150 milligrams, depending on what part of my cycle I was in. And there's no way you can orally take that level. You wouldn't be able to. You'd be so constipated. And the constipation also reduces your digestive system's ability to absorb that. So it's not a good situation. So we will talk about that when we get up to iron. But I also wanted to mention, with the skin being a very good way to absorb minerals, it's also a very good way to absorb toxins, which we don't want to do. So you want to be really mindful of what you're putting on your skin. So women use so many personal care products. So I really want you to consider, how clean are your products? And can you replace them with cleaner ones? Now, I don't recommend you go and chuck everything out all at once. What I normally suggest to my women is, just as something runs out and it's time to replace it, you would be spending the money anyway. It's just time to look for a cleaner, safer alternative. And that way, in 6 months, you'll hopefully have gone through everything and you've got a much cleaner cupboard full of accessories. And then obviously there's supplementation and infusions in some case when necessary. So, guys, all minerals are necessary for all stages of life, but there are a handful of some that I see are really, really beneficial for this stage of life. And that is starting with, drumroll please, magnesium. It had to be magnesium, didn't it? Okay, so I think of magnesium as being the master mineral for the menopausal transition. And data suggests that 75 to 80%, that's a lot of us, are magnesium deficient. So this is just some of the common deficiency signs. So think excessive sweating, so hot flushes and night sweats, headaches, poor stress response, mood swings, insomnia, muscle cramps, eye twitches, fatigue, brain fog, elevated blood pressure, bone density issues, constipation, pain, sugar cravings, and high estrogen conditions like fibroids, as magnesium can promote estrogen detoxification. So when we're looking at foods, the foods that you might want to consider because they're high in magnesium are your dark green leafy veggies, legumes, nuts, seeds, beans, avocados, fish, chicken, beef, but the most popular source, and I can't believe I'm going to be saying this, is dark chocolate. I bet you didn't think that. You'd come to a talk by Nutritionist talking about the benefits of dark chocolate. But anyway, when we're looking at testing, you can test for magnesium deficiency, but the standard test your doctor runs is a serum magnesium test, and this will only show severe chronic magnesium deficiency, as the serum only contains about 1% of your magnesium stores, and it's highly regulated and will draw magnesium from other sites to make sure this level is maintained. Whereas a functional test called the red blood cell magnesium is the gold standard, and it catches deficiencies faster, as your body will pull magnesium from here if your supplies are inadequate. But to be really honest with you, I don't really test for magnesium. I look at signs and symptoms. So most of these signs and symptoms are symptoms of the menopausal transition. And magnesium is so easy to supplement with. There are pills, powders, liquids, creams, oils, even bath salts. Like Epsom salt is a good way to get some magnesium in through your skin. And what I really love about magnesium is it's the one mineral that does so much. Many women notice multiple benefits from taking this one mineral. And this is because magnesium is an essential mineral cofactor in over 300 reactions. So talk about a bang for your buck. So you can see why I love magnesium. But before you all run off and buy it, I want you to know that all supplements have cautions, contraindications, and medical interactions. So make sure you get your prescriptions checked before you start. And if you have no existing concerns, my main problem is with diarrhea. So if you take magnesium and you get diarrhea, it could be the form of magnesium. So magnesium oxide draws water into the bowel and causes diarrhea, so it's the form, or it could even be the dose. So if this ever happens, stop your magnesium supplement. The diarrhea should resolve in the day or so, and just check what's in it. It might be worth talking to a practitioner about a different product or a different dose. So that's my 2 cents on magnesium, but I want to share with you guys some of the research I found on magnesium and the menopausal transition. So first of all, we're going to look at 2 pilot studies. So a pilot study is generally a smaller group of women that it's not the gold standard. It's just a cheap test they do to see if something works and whether it's worth spending money on the gold standard double-blind placebo trials. So in the 2 pilot studies I'm going to show you, these women are all breast cancer survivors. So they were looking for a non-hormonal approach to help them with the symptoms of menopause. And in this particular trial, they used 400 milligrams of magnesium oxide daily for 4 weeks. And what they found with these women is that it was a really safe and inexpensive therapy, and that they had a greater than 50% reduction in symptoms. Just saying that, you know what, this is potentially really good. Let's consider doing a larger trial. But this is the second pilot study that I found, and this one is a higher dose. So it's 400 milligrams of magnesium oxide twice daily for 4 weeks, so the same length of time. So when people ask, when should I expect to see change? Here we go. Within 4 weeks, I would say much quicker. I generally see people turn the symptoms around significantly quicker. And with this, they found that 45% of women had 100% reduction in hot flushes, that 45% had at least a 50% reduction in hot flushes, and that 10% had no improvement. How good is that? Does that seem like a really cheap and effective way of managing hot flush symptoms? All right, so then looking at the next one. So this was the gold standard double-blind placebo trial, and they went for an even higher dose. So 1,200 milligrams of magnesium oxide, and they also did longer. They did it for 8 weeks. And I'm not surprised that this study did not go well. It was the dose in the form of magnesium. It gave everyone diarrhea. So what the researchers found was that It did stop hot flushes, but it really was not, it wasn't a viable treatment, because if women have less hot flushes, they want to be out there enjoying life, getting the most out of life. They don't want to be hiding in the bathroom. So, in my humble opinion, I think it was the form and I think it was the dose. So, this is where it helps to have a practitioner involved to help you navigate these kind of things. So, that's magnesium. Should we look at another mineral? I hope so. All right, let's go. So, number two might surprise a few of you, as this is an essential electrolyte that has been wrongfully vilified over the years, with many still believing a low salt diet is a healthy diet. And this really concerns me, as the menopausal transition is actually a time of greater sodium needs, especially if you're experiencing hot flushes, night sweats, excessive sweating in general. You're losing salt. And then if you're experiencing heavy menstrual bleeds, you're losing salts. And some of the signs that your body requires more sodium is things like muscle cramps, brain fog, fatigue, water retention, headaches, nausea, dehydration, insomnia, mood swings, insulin resistance, as a salt deprived body is a sugar addicted body, and weight gain. And it's a really, really familiar list, isn't it? But it's also a progressive problem, as the longer you're experiencing these symptoms, such as night sweats, the more deficient you're becoming and the more additional symptoms that you start developing. So it's a really simple change, but it can be so effective. I had a patient who was experiencing drenching night sweats, who would soak through her clothes and her bed sheets. With roughly 4 nights a week, she had to wake up her husband to change the sheets. And this had been going on for 12 months before she reached out to me. So initially I wanted to do some testing. So the only change I made was to add in an electrolyte drink while we waited for the results to come. So when I touched base with her, it was about a month later, she said that she'd had a 90% improvement, that there were only 2 night sweats in that month, and she didn't need to change the sheets. How life-changing and simple and cheap and effective is that? You can see why I love mineral therapy. Like it has like it's very powerful. So please do not discount how much salt you are losing with sweating, and that the symptoms are relentless until you break out of the dehydration cycle. So there are 2 ways I suggest to help topping up your sodium levels. And the first is with a clean electrolyte. And by clean, I mean no sugar, no colors, no artificial flavorings. And usually it's a concentrate in which you add a cap to some water. Alternatively, I ask women to buy a good quality natural salt to add to their diet. And I like Celtic sea salt or Himalayan rock salts, as these natural salts contain so many trace minerals. It's like having a superfood. Where table salt has been processed, it's often deodorized and bleached, and trace minerals have been removed, and that can contribute to further mineral imbalances. So if you've got any table salt at home, I recommend you throw it out. This is not one where I would finish up first then replace. I would bin it immediately, unless you've got little kids or grandkids you can turn into Play-Doh. That's probably the only good use for it. But before you go drowning your food in salt, please note this information is a general guide. It doesn't take into account your individual circumstances. So if you've been told to be on a low salt diet, discuss that with your healthcare provider, because they know more about your individual circumstances than I do in this script for them. But my second suggestion is also to have a look at this book. So it's another one of Dr. James's books, and it's called The Salt Fix. So in this book, Dr. James was looking at why the low salt recommendation came into effect and the results that have occurred since this time. And he found that the war on salt started in about 1904. And at that point in time, it was thought that about 5% of the population suffered with hypertension. And it's when the recommendation to reduce salt to lower blood pressure began. And by 1839, we would have hoped to have seen some positive changes. But instead, the American population with hypertension had increased to 13%, and today it's 1 in 3. That doesn't make sense. The recommendations for salt intake have continuously reduced over this time, yet the amount of hypertension has gone up. No, maybe we got this wrong. And it wouldn't be the first time. Like, you just think about the low fat movement and how much harm that did. And when we take a global perspective, we would expect to see the countries with naturally higher salt intakes to have the highest blood pressure, but this doesn't match either. So countries like Japan and France and South Korea consume the most salt per capita, yet they have the lowest rate of heart disease. It's interesting, isn't it? So I do recommend you grab the book and have a look if that interests you. We're going to move on to iron. This has been the biggest problem in my life, iron. Okay, so iron comes up at different reasons at different stages of the menopausal transition. So many perimenopausal women can't get enough of it, while some postmenopausal women may struggle with iron overload. So if we start at the beginning, one of the most common mineral deficiencies seen in early perimenopause is iron. And this is because many perimenopausal women start to notice their periods change. For some, it gets lighter, but for many, it gets heavier and longer, with extra days of spotting and more blood lost in general over the month. And the most common symptom women notice is fatigue. And it's fatigue that is not relieved by sleep. And as a general rule, iron deficient women aren't sleeping anyway. Between the restless legs, the painful leg cramps, insomnia is a common occurrence. But there's been other minerals that we've discussed today that also cause those painful leg cramps, and they are magnesium and sodium. So there's multiple different things you can consider if you're unfortunately experiencing that. Plus, you're going to look pale. You might feel short of breath. You might be experiencing palpitations, headaches, dizziness, could feel faint, have cold hands and feet, and brain fog. It's not fun, let me tell you from personal experience. So depending on how low you are, you may be encouraged to eat more iron-containing foods, such as red meat, seafood, poultry, and there are also smaller amounts in certain plant-based foods, such as lentils, spinach, and beans. Some of you may need to supplement or have an iron infusion. But I wanted to point out a few things. If you're someone that has been taking iron, but you're not absorbing it, that your digestive system is struggling with that absorption, then consider transdermal. And it's just that so many women have inflamed digestive tracts and infections like H. pylori, or they're on medications like protein pump inhibitors, and these all block iron absorption. So I use a compounding pharmacy. They make all my transdermal iron cream, and I personally have had wonderful results with it. But the other issue that I wanted to also talk about with oral is just the constipation. You can't take the same amount orally as you can do transdermally. The other thing to consider is if you are losing a lot of blood, that blood is more than iron. And if you're having heavy bleeds, you are missing several nutrients that often aren't considered. How about the mineral copper? Copper is a key building block for ceruloplasm. I think of ceruloplasm as like the cup that holds iron. So if you don't have enough of the cup, the iron's got nowhere to sit, so you're not going to use it. But there are also, actually, why I'm talking about copper, I should let you know that copper is a little bit toxic. It's not something that you would self-prescribe. I do use it, but I use it in combination with blood testing just to check that we've got a nice level, that we're not going too high. But there are also other considerations if you're not having good iron stores. And it can be your hydration levels, can be electrolytes, especially sodium, vitamins A, vitamin B, especially B12, vitamin C, certain probiotics, and the list goes on. So if you have been struggling with iron absorption, it may be time to book a consultation to find your missing piece. We've got a little comment here. Yeah, so now we're going to go into iron overload, the opposite, which was what the question was about. So here we go in postmenopause. So, there you are more likely to have iron overload when you're no longer menstruating and you don't have the opportunity to release iron with your monthly bleed anymore. So, over time, your levels can slowly start to store. And an important test to have a look at is ferritin, as that indicates how much iron your body is storing. So, ferritin does like to be stored in the liver. So, I quite often see liver enzymes start to rise. And if they haven't had ferritin checked, that's one of the things I send them back to check to see if that is one of the underlying causes of the rise liver enzymes at this stage of life. So, ferritin also likes your bones. So, think about iron in general for a moment. Iron starts to rust outside the body. And it does the same thing in the body. So, just as a rusted gate will creak as it opens, so will your joints start to creak with the movement of the day. The gate may start to corrode and change shape as your bones start to develop osteoporosis. And a rusty gate may open slowly and get jammed, so may joints and overall energy levels start to decline. Other indications include abdominal pain, irregular heartbeat, blood sugar issues, depression, concentration, and cognitive issues. So, you really want to be proactive with rising ferritin levels, as it's likely to continue to rise unless you do something about it. So, if you're one of these women that do have elevated ferritin, I want you to get moving. Women who have long term exercise routines tend to have lower stored iron levels compared to non exercisers. Smokers, in general, also have higher ferritin levels. So, dietary wise, you may want to reduce the frequency of high iron containing foods. You can combine foods that can help to decrease iron absorption, such as tea. So, remember earlier on, I said you can use tea and coffee in different ways. So, if you've got low iron, you really don't want to be having any tea or coffee around your meals. But if you have high iron, you do want to have a cup of tea with your meal to help reduce the amount of absorbable iron. And it's the tannins that are in the teas that really help to do that. So, another liquid you need to be mindful with is alcohol. So, alcohol increases the absorption of iron. So, rethink that glass of wine with your steak. It's not going to help you. You also want to eat a whole lot of fibrous food, as that can help impair the absorption of iron. And a handy hint is if you're taking a multivitamin, just to go and check that it is an iron free version, because we don't want to be adding to the overload. I think I've got some research here for you too. I do. So, this particular study was looking at elevated iron, there being a direct correlation between elevated ferritin levels and postmenopausal hot flushes. So, this may be a consideration if you have gone through the transition and you're still having flushes. Have you checked? Have you had an iron study? Have you checked to see whether iron or elevated iron can be contributing towards the sensation of heat? This is another one looking at the role of iron and bone health. So, when we have elevated ferritin, elevated iron stores, they like to store in the bones, therefore reducing the bone's ability to regenerate. And this study was looking at by lowering iron levels, they used chelators, and they found it a really useful strategy for those struggling with osteoporosis to actually have a chance to rebuild their bone mass. So, something else to think about. And that also could be where exercise also comes in handy to help with that bone strength. Oh, another one. So, this one's looking at the relationship between elevated iron and insulin resistance and blood sugar disorders. So, unfortunately, the menopausal transition is a time where blood sugar levels in some women play up. And this is also looking at the extra association with iron. And what they found here is that the women who had the greatest increase in iron storage over the transition had the strongest association with increased insulin resistance. Um, Again, it's if you're having any blood sugar issues, have you had a look at what your iron levels are doing? It's not a correlation I think your GPs would put together, but this is a published medical study. Just having a look at the time, do you guys currently have any questions? No, fantastic. I've obviously done a great job of explaining everything as I've gone along. So I wanted to let you know a little bit more about me. I am the host of the Menopause Natural Solution podcast, and we have just under 200 episodes. So chances are, whatever symptoms you're experiencing with the transition, I've got an episode on. I'm also the author of From Invisible to Invincible, The Natural Menopause Revolution. And I have a Natural Medicine Week special. So it's only for this week. The paperback version of the book is $20, including postage and handling. And that is for Australian addresses only. I've also put together an additional intake for my menopause makeover group. This is a small group program that is going to run for the month of June. There's an online portal with all the information in there, but every Wednesday night we're going to come together as a community and we're going to discuss it. And similar to today, but also very different in that you guys are all going to have your cameras on and your mics on, and it's a discussion. It's not me just presenting information. And what I like about keeping the group small, like it's a maximum of 12 women, means that you all get a chance. Everyone's going to talk, and it's a small and intimate little community. Quite often friendships are made. So that's something to consider. I also do one-on-one consultations. That is what I do most days, is sitting here and putting on my detective hat and digging deep and seeing if I can find the root cause of issues for women, particularly in the menopausal transition. That's what I focus and specialize in. But what was really, really exciting, and I announced it yesterday, was that Namcan, which is a eco farm, a luxurious eco farm in Laos, approached me about running a menopause retreat there later this year. So at the moment, I don't have dates, I don't have times or money. I'm just looking for an expression of interest. So if you'd like to come away on holidays with me to an eco farm where we've got organic foods on site, we're going to have cooking classes, daily yoga, daily massage. We're on this beautiful river. We're going to be kayaking and relaxing, enjoying everyone's company. Let me know. There's an expression of interest form on my website. At this moment, I'm just trying to figure out what length of time people want to go away for. Like, I don't want to go to Laos for 3 days. That's not going to happen. But whether it's 5 or 7 or 10, I think if you get much longer than that, 14 days, I don't think I'm coming back. I think I'm staying there for life. But I love Southeast Asia and I have lived over there. I started my career at Chivasom, which is the world's #1 health retreat, and I lived there for 2 years. So I've seen the transformational power of getting out of your home when there's no laundry, there's nothing to be done. You just need to relax and enjoy life. It is just so powerful. But anyway, that is me. And I wanted to double check again whether there's any questions and to really thank you for your time. Like this week has been great. I've had 3 different things. I've got to connect with different people. So I really appreciate your time.